The desert wind moved like a restless spirit across the canyon floor, lifting dust into the fading golden light of evening. Daniel Hayes had been riding for hours, following a quiet trail that wound between dry rocks and scattered brush. His horse slowed on its own, sensing something unusual ahead. Daniel narrowed his eyes and looked down toward a cluster of jagged stones below the ridge. At first, he thought it was just a piece of cloth caught on the rocks. Then it moved. He slid off his horse instantly and made his way down the slope, boots crunching against loose gravel. As he got closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a young Apache woman. She lay half hidden between the stones, her dark hair tangled with dust, her arm streaked with dried blood. Her clothes were torn, and bruises marked her skin. She looked as though she had crawled there in desperation, before her strength gave out. For a moment, Daniel simply stood there, unsure. Encounters like this rarely ended peacefully. Slowly, he knelt beside her and reached out to check her breathing. She was alive, barely. Her eyes fluttered open. The instant she saw him, terror filled her face. She gasped and tried to push herself away, her injured body trembling with effort. Her voice came out hoarse and broken. "No, please." Daniel froze, his hands suspended in the air. He had seen fear before, in men, in animals, but this was different. This was not fear of death. This was fear of him, fear of what he represented. She looked at his hat, his boots, the revolver at his side, and her body tensed, as if expecting chains to appear at any moment. In her world, men like Daniel did not rescue Apache women. They captured them, sold them, owned them. Her hands scraped weakly against the dirt as she tried to crawl away, even though she barely had the strength to move. Daniel quickly removed his hat and stepped back, lowering himself to her level. "You're safe," he said quietly. But the words meant nothing to her, because safety had never come from a cowboy before. Her breathing grew fast, panic rising in her eyes as she braced herself for whatever she believed would come next. Daniel realized then that saving her wounds would be the easy part. Earning her trust would be the real battle. When she woke again, the world felt unfamiliar. The ceiling above her was made of rough wooden planks instead of open sky. The air smelled of pine smoke and something warm, something comforting. For a moment she didn't move, her body stiff with confusion. Then memory rushed back. The canyon, the cowboy. Her eyes snapped open, and she pushed herself up with a sudden gasp of pain. Clean bandages wrapped her arm and shoulder. Her wounds had been washed. Her torn clothes had been carefully mended. She looked down at herself, panic rising in her chest. She was inside his home. Her breathing quickened as her mind raced through everything she had been taught. Everything she had seen happen to women who fell into the hands of men like him. She swung her legs off the bed despite the pain, preparing herself. When Daniel stepped through the doorway carrying a bowl of steaming soup, she spoke before he could say a word. "I will work," she said quickly, her voice trembling but determined. "I clean, cook, carry water, obey." The words came out rehearsed, like something learned long ago for survival. Daniel stopped mid-step, confused. She lowered her gaze, expecting anger for speaking out of turn. "I will not cause trouble," she added softly. "I know my place." The silence stretched. Daniel set the bowl down slowly on the small wooden table beside her. "You don't have to work," he said. She frowned slightly, unsure she had understood. "I know how this goes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hands tightened in the blanket, as she waited for the price of her rescue to be spoken aloud. Instead, Daniel shook his head gently. "You're not my servant." Her eyes lifted, cautious and disbelieving. "You're my guest." The word felt strange in the air. Guest. No chains were placed on her wrists. No rules were spoken. No demands followed. Just a bowl of warm soup, and a man who stepped back to give her space. She stared at him, searching his face for deception, for cruelty hiding behind kindness. But she found none. For the first time since raiders had taken her weeks ago, since fear had become her constant companion, she felt something unfamiliar stir inside her chest. Not safety, not yet, but the faintest possibility that she might not be owned again. The days that followed passed quietly, marked not by commands or demands, but by a strange and unfamiliar patience. She remained cautious, watching, Daniel's every movement as though expecting the moment his kindness would vanish. Each morning she woke with the same thought. Today he will show his true nature. But each day ended the same way. Nothing changed. He never raised his voice. He never entered without knocking lightly against the doorframe first. He left food on the table without waiting for her to thank him. At night, he slept on a chair by the fireplace instead of taking the bed. She noticed everything. Trust did not come easily. Fear had lived too long inside her bones. Even the smallest kindness felt like a trap waiting to spring. When she insisted on helping, he allowed only small things, fetching water, feeding the horse, sweeping the floor, and even then, he treated her not as a servant but as someone choosing to stand beside him. One afternoon, he brought out a saddle and gestured toward the horse outside. "You should ride," he said simply. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Riding was freedom. Freedom was not something given to captives. Still, she followed him outside, her steps hesitant. He showed her how to mount slowly, guiding without touching unless necessary. When she finally sat atop the horse, the wind brushing against her face, something inside her loosened. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel trapped. Later, he handed her a knife. Her body stiffened instantly. Weapons were not given to those who were meant to be controlled. But his expression held no threat. "For protection," he said. She stared at the blade in her hands, unsure whether to feel gratitude or confusion. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of fire, she found him sitting quietly outside the cabin. She gathered her courage and asked the question that had lived in her heart since the moment she woke. "Why?" Daniel didn't answer right away. His gaze remained fixed on the fading light. Finally, he spoke. "Because nobody deserves to live in fear." The simplicity of his words struck deeper than anything else he had done. Tears gathered in her eyes before she could stop them. No man had ever spoken to her without expectation before. And slowly, almost without her noticing, the constant weight of terror began to lift. Not all at once, but enough for hope to find a place where fear had once ruled. The morning came quietly, wrapped in soft light, and the cool breath of desert air drifting through the open window. She had been awake long before sunrise, sitting at the edge of the bed, listening to the steady rhythm of a world that no longer felt entirely hostile. Her wounds had healed, the bruises had faded, her strength had returned, and with it came the question she had avoided asking herself: what now? When she stepped outside, she found Daniel already there, saddling a horse. The leather straps creaked under his hands as he worked with calm, practiced movements. He did not look surprised to see her standing there. He simply finished tightening the saddle and stepped aside. The horse was ready. For her. Understanding settled slowly in her chest. He wasn't asking her to stay. He wasn't expecting anything in return. He was letting her go. "You're free to leave," he said quietly. The words landed heavier than she expected. She searched his face, waiting for the hidden condition, the unspoken demand that would surely follow. But none came. The silence stretched between them. "You saved me," she said finally, her voice unsteady. "And you ask nothing?" Daniel gave a small shrug. "Freedom isn't something you owe back." Her throat tightened as she absorbed his answer. Every lesson she had ever learned told her that kindness always came with a price, that survival meant giving something in return. But here there was nothing to repay. No debt, no chains, just a choice. She approached the horse slowly, placing a hand against its neck before pulling herself into the saddle. The familiar motion felt different now, not forced, not commanded, voluntary. Daniel stepped back, giving her space, his expression calm. He didn't try to stop her, didn't try to convince her to stay. He simply respected her decision before she had even made it. She turned the horse toward the open land beyond the cabin. The path ahead stretched wide and endless, leading back to everything she once knew. She could leave, and he would not follow. The realization struck deep. For the first time, a man had held power over her and chosen not to use it. Her vision blurred as emotion rose in her chest. She urged the horse forward, but after only a few steps she stopped. The silence behind her felt heavier than the open road ahead. Slowly she turned back, not because she was owned, not because she was afraid, but because, for the first time in her life, staying was a choice she could make freely.